Picture this, a time when true titans walked among us, inspiring as much fear as admiration. Think of an era when gigantic warriors were integral parts of armies, eliciting looks of astonishment and enchantment from ordinary people. These giants were not mere legends or distant myths. They were here, woven into the tapestry of our history, leaving indelible marks that resonate to this day. Goliath, this emblematic figure of strength and grandeur, is just the tip of the iceberg of this fascinating narrative. His tale, immortalized in 1 Samuel 17, reveals a confrontation so epic that even the bravest felt a shiver down their spine at the thought of challenging him. But delving deeper into the mists of the past, we discover that Goliath was not alone. He was just one among a remarkable group of giants, a lineage of formidable beings whose stories are as captivating as they are enigmatic. Many are unaware, but Goliath had brothers, each carrying their own aura of mystery and greatness. Their armors and weapons were not just instruments of war, they were symbols of a superhuman strength, with weights and dimensions that defied comprehension. But beyond their imposing physique, these giants carried with them unique stories, true living chapters of the ancient battles that shaped our world. The existence of these giants, mentioned in the sacred scriptures, raises intriguing questions about our history. Were they the Nephilim, the offspring of angels and humans, as some believe? Or were they simply men of exceptional stature, descendants of a lineage forgotten by time? Join me on this journey through 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles as we explore the tales of these mythical figures. Let's investigate their origins, challenging established narratives and delving into the depths of their existence. As we remember Goliath, we cannot forget the setting of his final battle, the Valley of Elah, where he stood towering before the armies of Israel, a giant among men, challenging anyone who dared to face him. Armed to the teeth with armor that was a fortress in itself and a spear that resembled a mast, Goliath was the embodiment of war itself. But as we revisit these stories, we not only admire his magnitude, we are invited to reflect on the true meaning of these giants in our past. They represent not only brute strength, but also unresolved mysteries and questions that still echo through the centuries. So as we navigate through these ancient texts, let yourself be captivated, not only by the grandeur of these beings, but also by the richness and complexity of their stories. Let's unravel together the secrets of the giants, these fascinating characters who, one way or another, shaped the course of our history. Just imagine, throughout the centuries documented in the sacred text of the Bible, a people known as the Philistines frequently enter the scene as the great rivals of the Israelites. This rivalry was no joke, especially in the era of a certain King Saul, who had to face these guys head-on several times. But among all these stories of confrontations, there is one that stands out, the one that speaks of a giant among men, Goliath, the standout of the opposing team. In ancient times, such a warrior was not just another one on the battlefield. He was the main star, a true symbol of power and honor. These exceptional warriors, these champions, were handpicked for being simply the best of the best, with an extraordinary courage and combat skill that left everyone in awe. They were not just a face in the crowd. They were the embodiment of bravery and the warrior spirit of an entire army. Their mission, to defend the honor and interests of their people, often deciding the outcome of an entire conflict in a single face-to-face combat. It was a way to settle things without turning everything into a bloodbath. Now, let's turn our attention to our giant, Goliath. This guy was no joke. His presence on the field was not only a physical threat because of his colossal size, but also played a psychological game, symbolizing all the strength and determination of the Philistines. The challenge he issued and his epic confrontation with David are those moments we don't forget. showing just how crucial these champions were in battles of yore. Goliath, hailing straight from Gath, was a colossus, standing over 9 feet tall. To give you an idea, even the tallest man recently recorded, Sultan Kosin, doesn't reach that mark at only 8 feet 3 inches. And Goliath wasn't just big, the guy was a walking fortress. Picture him there, fully equipped with a bronze armor that resembled a small personal fortress, weighing in at 125 pounds, not counting the leg greaves for protection and a spear heavier than the gear of many athletes today. Oh, and we can't forget the shield bearer, this indispensable partner who carried a giant shield, ready to deflect any attack coming his way. Goliath's arrival on the battlefield was like a challenge thrown down, not only because of his imposing presence, but also because of his audacious invitation. If an Israelite could defeat him, the Philistines would surrender. But if he won, the Israelites would become their servants. This ultimatum left the army of Israel paralyzed with fear, with King Saul and his men hesitating for 40 days. Just imagine the tension, the suspense of those days, as everyone pondered who would have the courage to face such a giant. And then, just when you think the story couldn't get any more exciting, along comes David, this young shepherd, who enters the scene as if it's no big deal. Despite not looking anything like a soldier, this guy was indignant at Goliath's words. With a courage that could only come from unwavering faith, he offered to face the giant. Now picture this. King Saul looked at this kid and could only think, really? But David had his own stories of bravery, of how he defended his sheep against predators, and that ended up convincing Saul. The most incredible thing about this whole story is that David didn't rely on weapons or armor. His confidence came from something much greater. His faith. There he goes, armed only with a sling and a stone, facing a giant armed to the teeth. And wouldn't you know it? With an envy-inducing precision, David fells Goliath and changes the course of the battle, showing that sometimes true strength comes from where we least expect it. But hold on to your hats. Goliath the giant wasn't a lone case. This guy had a whole family of giants. That's right, Goliath had brothers who were no slouches when it came to impressing with height and strength. The scriptures tell us that these brothers also met their end at the hands of David's men, in a series of confrontations that seem straight out of an epic saga. Among these giants, we have stories of warriors with 6 fingers on each hand and foot, a detail that seems otherworldly. And it doesn't stop there. Each of these encounters with Goliath's brothers and their descendants was a chapter unto itself in the eternal feud between Israelites and Philistines. They sought revenge for Goliath's defeat, but ended up meeting the same fate. What this part of the story shows us isn't just the continuation of a historical dispute, but also the strength of faith and determination. David, with his sling, not only felled Goliath, but paved the way for a series of victories that redefined power and courage. These encounters with Goliath's relatives, full of tension and challenges, are a reminder that sometimes the greatest giants we face can be overcome with the most unlikely weapons. In this fascinating saga, we have the mention of the last of the giants linked to Goliath, a figure of unique grandeur, with a characteristic that seems straight out of a fairy tale, 6 fingers on each hand and foot. This giant, faced and defeated by Jonathan, David's nephew, is a final reminder of the incredible confrontations that marked the tumultuous relationship between Israelites and Philistines. These stories, blending courage, faith, and epic clashes, continue to capture our imagination and make us question the reality of these gigantic characters. Now, delving a bit into the curiosity surrounding the origin of Goliath and his brothers, the question arises: were they part of the Nephilim, those enigmatic beings mentioned in other passages of the Bible? Although this idea sparks debates and speculations, the direct connection between Goliath, his relatives, and the Nephilim is not clearly established in the scriptures. Instead, the texts suggest a more earthly origin for Goliath and his brothers, pointing to them as descendants of the Rephaim, linked to the lineage of the Anakim, another strain of giants known in the Bible. It's interesting to note that the presence of giants in the biblical text is not exclusive to the Philistines or the result of a mythical origin involving fallen angels. Other giants like Og, king of Bashan, are also mentioned, highlighting that the existence of beings of extraordinary stature was a recurring theme in ancient narratives, without necessarily linking them to the Nephilim. These stories, when shared, bring with them a wealth of imagination and teachings. They show us that regardless of the size of the challenges we face, determination, faith, and courage can lead us to overcome seemingly insurmountable adversities. Goliath, his brothers, and the epic confrontations they provoked remind us of the diversity and extraordinariness of creation, as narrated in the sacred scriptures. In this way, as we tell and retell these stories, we not only keep alive the memory of these epic confrontations, but also inspire each listener to reflect on the giants they may face in their own lives, remembering that sometimes the greatest battles are won with the smallest of stones. The story of the Nephilim, as narrated in the book of Genesis, is one of the most enigmatic and fascinating passages of the Bible. It tells us about a time when the sons of God looked upon the daughters of men and, attracted by their beauty, chose some of them as their wives. From this unusual union were born the Nephilim, beings described as giants of great strength, considered the heroes and mighty men of antiquity. This narrative opens a range of interpretations and debates among scholars, giving rise to a variety of theories about who these sons of God and their descendants really were. The most widespread theory, and one that captures the imagination of many, is that the Nephilim were the result of unions between fallen angels and human women. This interpretation portrays the Nephilim as beings of a hybrid nature, part human, part angelic, distinguished not only by their physical stature but also by their exceptional abilities. It's a view that fits into the narrative of extraordinary beings who inhabited the earth in a distant past, and who would have left an indelible mark on human history and mythology. On the other hand, there are those who see this interpretation as overly fantastical, opting for a more earthly explanation. Some suggest that the sons of God could simply be men from the lineage of Seth, the virtuous son of Adam, while the daughters of men could be descendants from the less noble lineage of Cain. This approach seeks to humanize the story, viewing the Nephilim not as supernatural hybrids, but as men of remarkable stature and deeds, the result of the union of two distinct lineages of humanity. The question of whether Nephilim exist today is even more shrouded in mystery. The scriptures mention that there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, suggesting that their presence was not limited to a single period. However, there is no contemporary evidence to prove the existence of beings similar to the Nephilim described in the Bible. The absence of such beings today could be attributed to many factors, including the possibility that they were a unique lineage, diluted over generations, or even extinct in one of the biblical cataclysms, such as the flood. Despite differences in interpretations and beliefs about the current existence of the Nephilim, the fascination with these beings remains. They are a reminder of the rich tapestry of stories and legends that make up the sacred scriptures, offering a window into how our ancestors viewed the world and the existence of beings beyond human understanding. The Nephilim, whether they are the offspring of divine beings and mortals, or simply men of great stature and heroic deeds, continue to inspire, challenge our imagination, and make us question the nature of the divine and the mystery of creation. The question of the continuity or existence of the descendants of the Nephilim after the flood is undoubtedly one of the most intriguing mysteries that emerge from the biblical text. The narrative in Genesis 6 suggests that the Nephilim inhabited the earth both before and after the flood, which leads to speculation about how they could have survived an event that, according to the scriptures, wiped out all human and animal life, except that which was protected in Noah's Ark. The mention of giants in later biblical stories after the flood, such as Goliath and Og, king of Bashan, fuels the theory that there may have been a continuity of the Nephilim lineage or beings of similar stature and characteristics. However, the direct connection of these post-flood giants to the Nephilim mentioned in Genesis 6 is a matter of theological interpretation and speculation, as the Bible does not provide explicit details about the exact origin of these giants in later periods. One possible explanation for the presence of giants after the flood is the theory that the sons of God, mentioned in Genesis 6, could have returned to interact with humans, again generating beings of great stature. Another theory suggests that the information that there were Nephilim both before and after the flood may indicate the survival of their descendants in some unspecified way by the biblical text, perhaps through the lineage of one of Noah's sons, although this interpretation is controversial and not widely accepted. Furthermore, it's important to consider the possibility that the mention of giants in post-flood biblical accounts may not directly refer to the Nephilim, but rather to other lineages of human beings of great stature whose existence was known in various regions and ancient cultures. These individuals could simply be exceptionally tall humans whose physical characteristics were highlighted in biblical narratives due to their rarity and visual impact. In the biblical context, the Nephilim and giants are often shrouded in mystery and symbolism, serving as metaphors for power, corruption, and divine intervention in human history. The persistent fascination with these beings reflects human interest in the supernatural and the extraordinary, as well as the desire to explore the depths of faith, morality, and human existence. The presence of giants in post-flood biblical narratives, such as the Anakim or the Rephaim, adds layers of complexity to the interpretation of Scripture and generates heated debates among scholars and theologians. Although these beings share similar characteristics to the Nephilim mentioned before the flood, it's important to distinguish between these different groups. The direct association between the Nephilim and the giants mentioned after the flood is not clearly established in the Bible, suggesting that while there may be similarities, they represent distinct entities within the biblical narrative. The idea that a lineage of the Nephilim could have survived the flood raises significant theological questions, especially regarding God's intention with the flood. The Bible describes the flood as an act of divine judgment, aimed at eradicating wickedness from the earth, sparing only Noah and his family to start anew for humanity. The survival of the Nephilim, or any malevolent lineage, after this event would question the effectiveness and purpose of divine judgment. Within this context, the theory that the Nephilim mentioned after the flood represent a second group of angels who committed the same sin as the first group in Genesis 6 is speculative and does not find solid footing in the biblical narrative. Alternatively, the hypothesis that the term Nephilim may have become a generic designation for giant warriors is a more plausible interpretation, suggesting terminological continuity rather than direct descent. The mention of the Nephilim in Numbers 13, when the spies describe the inhabitants of Canaan as giants descended from Anak, may reflect this terminological evolution. In this context, Nephilim becomes a term to describe figures of great stature and skill in battle, without necessarily implying a supernatural origin or a direct connection to the pre-flood Nephilim. Therefore, the presence of giants in post-flood biblical narratives can be seen more as a reflection of the diversity of creation and the different lineages within humanity, rather than an indication of the survival of a specific lineage of supernatural beings. This interpretation aligns with God's sovereignty and the purpose of the flood, preserving the integrity of divine judgment and emphasizing God's ability to purify and renew.